And the reality is, what we're learning from women is that they're seeking a man that takes leadership and ownership and says, I want to parent this child. Yet women aren't feeling safe enough to do that with their partners. And so we have this like silent game of like no communication happening where I'm assuming this and you're assuming that.
Is anyone really able to discuss the effects of abortion without it becoming political? Because it is an important issue that's not going anywhere anytime soon. Well, I have found the only organization on the planet that I know of that's non-political on this topic, as they provide emotional support for women and for men as well who have been impacted by an abortion. Lisa Rowe, a clinical social worker and the CEO of Support After Abortion, joins me now. So, let's do it.
Too many days in the darkness without a glimpse of the light. Running tired and broken and scared, but I swear I'll never give up the fight. I see you broken and beat, head pulled down over your eyes. Every part of you wants to surrender, but darling, you were meant to survive. With every star.
Lisa, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited for how we're going to dive into this conversation.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, and just to start, would you be able to give us just a brief overview, really, for people just hearing about you guys for the very first time, on really what your goals are and what you guys try to focus on?
Sure. So I'm a licensed clinical therapist. And so that's a long way to say that I'm a mental health counselor. And we kind of stumbled into this in a unique way, the support after abortion space. It was a space that was unknown to me, never taught to me in grad school. And so when I found myself in our local pregnancy center learning about the need for after abortion support, I was dumbfounded. I had no idea that this was even a thing. And I'm sure we'll talk a lot about that today, about why it wasn't a thing and why it's not a thing for most people listening today. But we really were concerned, our founder specifically was really concerned that more people, knowing how many people have been impacted by abortion, weren't reaching out for support. And so our local resources in the church and in the pregnancy center were not being utilized in the way that we would have expected. And so we went on this hunt to kind of understand, was this a Southwest Florida thing? Was this a national thing? What was going on? And lo and behold, we found out that we weren't alone. It wasn't an isolated experience. This was actually a national experience, that 80% of those impacted by abortion don't know where to go, don't even know that there's something there for them. And so that means that only 20% of the millions of men and women actually know that there's help for them. And we'll talk, like I said, about why that is. But support after abortion is trying to bridge the gap, trying to help people understand that abortion is another human dysfunction that's damaging families, that's damaging self-esteem, that's isolating people, exacerbating substance abuse, suicidal ideation, anxiety, depression. And because we've seen it as a political and religious issue, we're not seeing it as the human issue. And so we're really trying to bring research and leaders together to better understand abortion as a crisis of the human experience. And so we've been on this mission for 3 years as our own nonprofit now. And we have a text line, a helpline for those impacted. And like I said, helping leaders around the country better understand how abortion actually is hurting people.
Yeah, when you started to say, maybe it's a South Florida thing or something, I was like, maybe it's a Bible Belt thing, but if that is the trend throughout the country, I mean, I had looked at an interview or a study from, I think it was like netdoctor.org, where they interviewed women who had abortions, and they were pretty much trying to figure out, are they being offered care, and what does that care look like, whether it's physical or emotional care, but it's post-abortion care. And right. 3 women basically said, no, it wasn't offered to me. And no, one person said, no, I don't need it. The other one said, I wish it was. And then another the third one had said, it was interesting, her response. She had said, no, it wasn't offered to me, but I didn't ask for it. And there was, she didn't realize that there was an implication in there. You know, it's not her, you know, I don't think it was her responsibility to ask for it. You know what I'm saying? Like services, like healthcare, and, you know, when you go into a doctor, I mean, it should be all of the resources that can be offered to you. So that did surprise me. So it's not, I guess it's not overall not surprising then that, you know, you guys were kind of having trouble finding people, even though there were plenty of them out there kind of needing help and needing assistance.
Yeah. And you mentioned something that I think is really important for the average listener. You know, we are programmed, so to speak, to see abortion as a political issue, a religious issue.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Unless we've experienced it in our own humanity, or we know somebody who has, or have heard stories like we're hearing today, it doesn't touch us the way that maybe suicide, divorce, homelessness, domestic violence, all of the other things that we hear in our world, it doesn't touch us that way. And so what you're sharing makes a lot of sense, because we don't see it that way. Even people who are experiencing it are confused by their own understanding. Yeah. And we often hear from men and women that I left the abortion clinic thinking it was no big deal, feeling incredibly relieved, met on the sidewalk with people holding signs of dead babies, and maybe hours, months later, I started feeling differently. And because of those experiences of hearing it shouldn't impact you and this is a murder, they don't know where to go for help. And they don't even know if they should feel validated in seeking help.
Yeah. And I guess it's just the classic suffering in silence then, you know, because you, I mean, who can you talk to then? You know, like if you've had an abortion and say you completely even regret it, and you know, you're starting to feel like grief. And so, I mean, who can you reach out to if, you know, you're feeling, I guess, like you're not allowed to?
Yeah. And that's where the whole condemnation message, you know, 1 in 4 women by their 45th birthday will experience abortion. And if you think about that, you know, when we go out to dinner, we often, you know, sit at a foretop, if you will. One of those people at that table will statistically have experienced abortion, and more if we think of partners and those that have been impacted. And so if we think of it like that, yet we're having conversations at the dinner table, like, who are we voting for this year? And what about this news article or whatever? We're not talking to that person about their experiences with any sort of compassion. We're talking with a very different lean. And so therein lies the reason why most people feel like, if I was to ever say anything about my abortion experiences, what would this person think of me? They've already shared all the belief systems they have in the political and religious realm. I don't fit there. Yeah,
very passionately. That's interesting then. So if you have 4 45-year-old women out at a cocktail bar. So just pretend, I guess it's a scene from Sex and the City, right? Right. And they're just talking. At least one of them have had an abortion. That is a crazy amount of number, 25%.
Yeah. And 1 or more, right? We know that 50% of the abortions happening in our country are repeat abortions, which means that 500,000 abortions every year are being performed on somebody who's already had a previous abortion experience. So this could mean that the people at your table have had more than one experience with abortion. And it could have been 20 years ago. It could have been yesterday. The stories run, you know, in my experience, there has not been any one specific story, that they're all unique and different.
So you guys, basically, your role starts with, okay, this person has had an abortion already and are now seeking some sort of physical or emotional support post-abortion. You guys aren't like involved in that unplanned pregnancy stage, and now there's someone's considering a decision-making process on their future for that unplanned pregnancy. You guys start basically, okay, you've had an abortion, and now where are we going from here?
Right. That is our main space. Sometimes people call us because of our name. The sheer factor of our name attracts people for marketing purposes to us. Like, hey, I'm thinking about this abortion. I'm on my way to this abortion experience. is there anything I need to know, or how can you help me? But yeah, our sole space, Support After Abortion, is to help that man or woman after their abortion experience, whether it's seconds later, decades later. We are here to help affirm and validate their experience and provide them the support that they need.
And I saw you guys do help. You do help men who have been part of that abortion process with a woman who's had an abortion, and maybe that's so interesting, because I feel like I've never heard of I mean, you guys are a unicorn to begin with, right? But also to lend a hand to men in that process who I feel like, sometimes have that backseat during that whole entire process. That's really interesting that you guys offer that hand, because you're considering then all of the factors involved.
Right. Because if you throw a stone into a pond, you see the ripples. And we say that about any human dysfunction, any damaging behavior. It's not just an isolated person experience. It affects the persons in the system. And I appreciate that you're willing to talk about the man, because for so long, I invalidated men. I villainized men. I think our culture does. I don't think I'm abnormal in that we see men as the reason why women choose abortion. And the reality is, based on the research that we've done, that's not truth at all. Men often feel like, because of the programming, that this is not a space that they can even enter into the conversation. It's her body, it's her choice. And the reality is, what we're learning from women is that they're seeking a man that takes leadership and ownership and says, I want to parent this child. Yet women aren't feeling safe enough to do that with their partners. And so we have this like silent game of like no communication happening, where I'm assuming this and you're assuming that. And so we have this huge population of men, 70% of them, that actually say, I need help afterwards. This is not okay. I'm hurting. And their experiences like run from, I forced her to have this experience, I drove her to the clinic, I was ambivalent, to I didn't want anything to do with this experience. I tried everything to stop her and I couldn't.
Yeah. Geez. That's and what you touched on right there too is a good point. It's the assumptions, because that is such a problem in relationships, when people just assuming, and it's so sad when two people might want the same thing, but they both have the wrong assumption, and then they make a decision based off of the assumption rather than just communicating. That is so sad. Is that what you're finding with people's circumstances that lead to having an abortion? Like, really, where do you guys start when somebody reaches out to you guys and says, hey, like, I need help? Do you guys rewind basically from, okay, well, what was the circumstance that you found yourself in that led to the unplanned pregnancy, that then led to the abortion, that then led you to this space? Is that kind of where you guys start? Because I feel like abortion, people tend to look at it like a destination. It's a destination. It's at the end. It's okay. I'm in this dilemma, this social dilemma. I have life circumstances, and this abortion is going to solve all my problems. I'm going to be able to go right back to life, whether it's college, or you have some financial circumstances you had to go through, or whether it's just this stigma, if you're a teenager, especially, and that is now going to solve all of my problems. I'll put it all behind me and I will start fresh. And really, and then they land with you guys. And where do you start with somebody when they come for support?
That's a great question. So first of all, we meet them with complete neutrality, right? Whatever our belief system is, whatever, none of that matters at this point. They've already experienced abortion, the pain, whatever reason it is that they're reaching out for support. We want them to know that it's about them. It's about loving them right where they are with compassion. They already have felt tons of condemnation. And then we want to make sure that they lead whatever healing journey that they want to take from here. Everybody's going to enter in a unique place, whether they're 60 years old and they went to this retreat weekend and they're having this revelation in their faith and they want to get closer to their God or whatever it is. And then you have women who are like, I just had a home abortion and I don't know what it was I was expecting, but it was not that. And I am mortified to go back into that bathroom and brush my teeth and get ready for school or work or whatever. So we need to make sure that we offer that space to them. But you ask a really interesting question, and that is what happens after that initial, connection. And we believe at Support After Abortion. In fact, I wrote a book called Unraveled Roots because I believe so heavily in this, that abortion is a symptom of a much deeper root. And all of the things that we experience, divorce, homelessness, mental health issues, they're all symptoms of much deeper roots. We even have research that says ADHD is a symptom of PTSD. So going back to that idea that woman doesn't wake up at 18 years old and says, I can't wait to have an abortion today. A man doesn't wake up at 22 and say, I can't wait to beat my girlfriend today, or I can't wait to use that hit of fentanyl that is going to kill me. Like, people don't wake up with that on their mind. It's their trauma that's leading them into these very vulnerable places. And it's likely that an abortion experience has followed other traumas before, right? So the 5-year-old girl who's abused, the 6-year-old boy who is raising himself because there's nobody at home to take care of him. They find themselves in vicarious situations looking to each other for healing in a relationship or whatnot. And then that leads to sex. And before you know it, they're in these unexpected times and they don't know what to do. And so we understand that. And it just depends on the client's journey where they want to go with that. But we definitely are very trauma informed, if you will, to help meet clients in those spaces if they need to.
That is interesting. Because it reminded me of, as soon as you said, it brought up in my mind, like alcoholism, where people think like an alcoholic just wants to drink. And it's like, there's so many factors that, like that domino effect that is the root of that alcoholism. And I never thought about that. And I think about basically, okay, like alcoholism, people with gambling problems, people with, mental health issues, there's always a venue to go to those. I mean, they've literally put it on commercials and TV and Facebook ads, but I mean, abortion, it's, I can only imagine that kind of struggle. What is from your perspective, what is the first impression you get from someone in terms of they sit down? Is it kind of just like letting the water fountain out, and I can only imagine how intense that first session is when people have had either years, if it's not recent, of finally getting this off of their chest and actually getting these emotions back to the surface. What are some of those first time sessions like?
Yeah. So oftentimes I think the water, that's a great metaphor, but also like just shaking up that 2-liter bottle and undoing the cap. It's like an explosion. It's an emotional release oftentimes. Okay, this is a safe place for me to share. And I've kept this inside and I don't know who else to talk to. And so this outpouring of feelings and explanations, which is why it's so important for us to walk with that compassion, because if we could create these conversations around our dining room table, that our conversations at the bar were more compassionate, it might not feel so much of an explosion, because we will have had conversations leading up to it that give us an opportunity to release it little by little, like we do in other facets of our life.
Yeah.
And so, it often feels that way. And it's unique because I might have a client who's struggling with sex addiction, which is still taboo in our culture, but he or she has likely already had a conversation with somebody who has said, maybe try therapy. That is not usually the situation with abortion. These people are reaching out quietly and without much, if anybody in their life that they've shared this with. And so it does feel a little bit, or even more magnifying. It feels bigger because there isn't anybody else that they've spoken to.
Well, it's interesting right now to think everyone, even who's listening and myself, like 1 out of 4 women that you said before under the age of 45, if you don't know anybody right now who has had an abortion, that just means they haven't told you about it. And there's a certain reason behind that then. And that's really, really interesting to think about, that people are walking around that are supposedly so good friends with you, but are walking around with this humongous life experience that they have gone through that is so traumatic, regardless of however people feel about it. Like it's huge. And if you don't know about it, that just means that they're probably not comfortable or feeling safe enough to talk with you. And, if you're not going to tell your boss that, you know what I'm saying? But if you have, if you are a father of daughters, if you are a mom of daughters, or a friend of people, and you don't know anybody technically that has told you that, it's something to kind of reconsider and start to think about maybe the potentials of what could have happened, and maybe retailoring some language a little bit to be a little bit more of a softer landing pad for people to land on, just in case a circumstance like that does come up.
Oh my gosh. So let me just kind of tell you my story in this realm, because you're so right. For 15 years as a clinician, I never talked about this. When I started to better understand, I would go to people kind of really naive and saying, friends of mine that I've been friends, on a Friday night, we'd be going to a football game or whatever. And I'd say, I remember one specific conversation. I said, I'm working in this capacity now, and I didn't even realize abortion was a thing. And I said, do you, what are your thoughts on this? And she goes, Lisa, I experienced abortion when I was 19. And I'm like, for how long have we been friends? 5 years. And I feel like we've shared the most details of our lives. And because I just showed up very kind of like blind to it all and non-assuming and really ignorant in my own understanding, what do you know that it offered an opportunity for her to talk? And then guess what ended up happening? She just went on this journey of healing, and she's now like, she wears a ring with her daughter's birthstone on it, along with her other 3 living children. I mean, it just took a whole new shape. Another girlfriend of mine disclosed, my husband has been making fun of me since I had my abortion experience, because after their abortion experience, they had a living son who has a very rare neurological issue. And in fights, he'll say things like, if you didn't have that abortion, we wouldn't have this issue now, and these sort of things. And
Jesus.
she had nowhere to say any of this. And then the last 2 big things that I would say in this realm that I can really relate to what you're saying is that my husband, almost a year ago to the day, he was having this major spiritual healing awakening, and he called me on the phone because he could not do it in person. And he said, Lisa, there's just one more thing I need to tell you. And I went, oh Lord, like, I've been here before.
Yep.
And he was, Lisa, I was 20 years old when I experienced my abortion. I've been afraid to tell you. I've been married to him 10 years. I'm like, what the heck?
Oh,
like,
shit.
Wow. And I say that with love in my heart, but I mean, what did I do that didn't make him feel safe? Or is there more to it? Well, he's unpacked it since. And the reality is he didn't know how to talk about it. He said, this was the one thing I pledged to myself, that I would go to my grave with this. I was never going to tell anybody. I was so ashamed of it. And so he like vomited, like we talked about just a little bit ago. And then the last one, I was in DC talking to leaders in this space. And he was just an amazing young 30-year-old professional. And he said, the minute I saw your name and the minute you walked into my office and presented what you were sharing, he's like, I know I needed to tell you that I was one of these guys. And I thought to myself, here's this guy, suit and tie. I don't know if he could lose his job or not, or what kind of ramifications could be the result of this. But for him to share his heart in what should have been a business meeting felt like this is what we should be doing in our world. And that's just a handful of experiences, because I have chosen to walk in this and see people's hearts. And it's been amazing.
No, it is. It is. I feel like it's almost similar to when people open up about like sexuality a little bit, when things they tuck things in for a while. But it goes to show you just how our minds work, where we are so fully capable of packing our suitcases up, going in the attic, and just putting it way, way in the back, and just walking back downstairs and never touching it again. But I mean, that weighs on you. That really does weigh on you. And I mean, when are women who have had abortions, in your experience, most susceptible to experiencing post-trauma and grief and stress and trauma? I'm sure it's like probably different for everybody, but I I don't know if you've ever heard of the singer Kaya Jones. She,
Mhm.
you probably more familiar with the group she was with, because it was an all-female group called the Pussycat Dolls. And
Mhm.
she just recently, back in January of this year, really opened up on her experience with the Pussycat Dolls, and a lot of, and her abortions that she had. She had her first one when she was about 16, 17. And then she went, that was right before she got onto the group. And then she had two more after that. And the first one, she said, like when she was 17, it kind of became normalized, because she had said, I crossed that red tape, and it's this big thing. But once you cross it, nothing, it was life back to normal pretty much for her. So it kind of normalized it. And then it led to two more that she actually ended up having some complications with for each of those. And it wasn't until she was performing live with the Pussycat Dolls, and she had said that she saw about two little girls in the crowd, and she's looking at those girls, and she could tell those girls are looking at her like a role model, like she's the epitome of success, of what these girls looking at her like, probably in gaga eyes, like, that's who I want to be. And she described that in that moment, she had felt absolutely awful about herself, because not only was she in the middle of getting an abortion during that time, but she had said that those girls didn't know really how she felt inside. Was the exact opposite of what these girls were looking at her with. She had absolutely zero self-esteem. She was going through body issues, and there was a really strict element that she had to adhere by on the Pussycat Dolls. She had said that, like, even like managers would call her up during the day and ask her, like, what have you been eating? Like things like that, to ensure that when you go on stage, like, you're looking fit and you're dressing how we want you to dress. And really, really interesting interview. But she was opening up about all of this now, because she's about 38 years old. And the regret that she had stems from, obviously, the trauma that was really starting to show during the interview. And back to my question, I guess, to linger around, the long way around. Does in your experience, if somebody were to say, I'm getting an abortion soon, what would you tell them in terms of when to expect a grieving, like a time of grief, or to go through trauma, if any? Because everyone's different. I'm sure there's people that have not gone through that, but just from your experience.
Yeah. And I would say that everybody is different. And so back to the 60-year-old woman who's now having like this reflection on life, and she's seen maybe the things she did well and the things she didn't, maybe seeing some of the mistakes she's made, looking at grandchildren possibly, and that sort of thing. And she's going, oh my gosh, like there would be another human being in my family right now had I not experienced abortion. Maybe the woman and man who aren't able to have children now. And I hear often, I killed the only child that I was given, right? And so there's that reflection, like my whole family line is now ended because I don't have biological children to show for, my only children are in heaven. And then we have the people that are reflecting, if they're open to it, how they're responding in their 30s to life. Why am I feeling so challenged? And with a great therapist and great people around you supports, you might be asked this one particular question, which allows you to then reflect on, how did that impact me, to grow awareness around it. Otherwise, we walk through life with these blinders, believing what we need to believe to reinforce the lifestyle we're leading. And so, it depends on where you are. And like I said earlier, we're seeing more and more women reaching out for help right after abortion now, because no longer are they anesthetized inside of a clinic. They are experiencing abortion in their homes and having to deal with the aftermath all by themselves, no anesthesia, and only their own defenses to walk through that. So it really depends. Relationships, are often some of the biggest reasons why people choose abortion. They want to see their relationships survive, their careers survive. And like my husband's story, his relationship ended almost immediately. And this MLB career that he was chasing, that he was inches from, was totally dissolved because he started self-medicating with alcohol to deal with the pain of his experience. And so that's not an uncommon story either.
Oh, and that full circle back to what you said before with the circumstances of these underlying factors as to what leads to it, because that's a perfect example that, and people might not even see that. Like his teammates on that team might just be like, yeah, he's going through a slump. He's going through a slump. Like when we look at these major athletes that haven't gotten like a hit in like 20 games or batting like 150, like, and we're so quick to just be like, yank his ass off the field, we pay millions of dollars, all this stuff. Like that is actually a huge symptom. And I guess we're looking at it through your eyes, which is like from the therapeutic lens, like there is something going on with that person mentality. And it kind of, things are really starting to make a lot of sense. It was kind of like Lamar Odom back on the Lakers a couple of years back with Kobe Bryant. He used to have these like up and down spells. Like he used to play really, really, really good. And then like, I'm talking 0.0 rebounds. You might as well not even came to the stadium. And then they did a documentary on him and followed him around for like a couple of weeks just to kind of give him some press. And they were showing him, he had like, I think he was eating candy and sugar, like almost like an obsessive amount, like every day. And like you're going to go up with that and then you're going to come right back down. And just depending on when you eat that amount, it's going to have that effect. And that is such a good, I'm so glad you said that because it makes sense now when you watch people on TV, like they're going through something and it's not the direct, you're only seeing the end result. You're not seeing like the iceberg effect, I guess. You're only seeing that little tippy top out of the water. You're not looking at the entirety, which is, it looks like Antarctica underneath the ocean.
Right. And going back to the basketball player you're talking about, I mean, he's eating sugar for what reason, right? Why does he consume that kind of level of sugar? Are we asking those questions? Are we just saying, nope, you got to start eating vegetables and fruit? Well, it's usually that, like, just change your diet. But the reason we have obesity, reason we have sugar is because underneath the surface, there's something driving, like you said, the iceberg, there's something driving that peak point. There's something driving that. And you're right. I mean, a lot of therapists will understand this. They'll understand that there's something underneath, but do you think they're asking about abortion as one of the things that's underneath the surface? Very rarely, very rarely. Do you think clergy members? No, very rarely. Do you think families? No, it's like the one thing that's way over here outside of, what could be underneath the surface.
Yeah. Yeah, and I hope the people that are listening right now are kind of starting to like align people like either in their own lives or friends, their family or something going, well, that makes sense now that someone's acting, maybe abnormally or something and or not themselves and there is something there and it could be something like an abortion. I mean, it really could be. I mean, I want to say at least two people I think of right now that have opened up to me about their abortion experience, and my first thought was, I'm kind of like, this person's telling me this. They're telling me this. If you were to look on paper in the rank and file system in their family tree and in their friendships, like dozens of people should come before me, dozens of people, but they're telling me. I kind of felt a little special in that person's life because they're telling me, and I don't know if maybe it's like the stranger effect. They just feel like safer telling someone who like they're a couple of degrees from, it's not their mom or their father or their brother or sister where they're going to have like consequences almost, and it could completely derail their relationships. It could be something like that, but they told me and I understood it. And I was happy that they were telling me because they were getting a little bit off of their chest, and hopefully they're, that does help them, because I can only imagine that emotional, like cobweb that they're in, because, and basically my question for you on this then is, people come to you, right? Do you go through the circumstances that, maybe have led to the abortion, try to get some of those deeper elements that may have caused them to have an unplanned pregnancy, which led to the abortion, which led to them at your office. And now you've gotten that first session done, and now it's time for hope and healing. Really, where do you guys kind of start generally? I know everyone's different, but generally, where do you guys start? Because there was mixtures of feelings. That Kaya Jones interview made a lot of sense, because she had feelings of trauma, deep feelings of regret. There was a sense of grief, especially. And the most important thing that I don't think she was able to make out in words during her interview, but that whole interview, I would say she was feeling resentment towards everybody who supported her decisions to making the abortion, which is probably managers. And so all right, it's one or the other, we're going to hire somebody else if you have a child, and you're not going to, be the same you. And the feeling of depression is a depressive feeling. You're a down feeling. And then the feeling of resentment is the opposite. It's an energetic feeling. It is, I'm angry. It's going to lead to feelings of angriness. So now you have almost when you drink a vodka Red Bull, the Red Bull's pulling you up, the vodka's pulling you down, and your heart is just well, which way do you want me to go? And not to mention, the famous quote, grief is love with no place to go. So, I mean, when we talk about grief, we're really talking about love in general. Just, it just has no place to go. So now love, depression, and resentment. I mean, those are such awful feelings to experience, but to experience them all in one sitting, I mean, you guys definitely have your work cut out for you when I'm sure somebody sits down with you. But where would you, back to my question again, long-winded again, just to get back to the question. But where do you guys start with them?
I so appreciate your passion and your willingness to go to this deep conversation. So I would say that the woman we're talking about and how we're unpacking her story, she's probably if we had a spectrum of 10 being totally aware and 0 being unaware, she's probably at a 7 or 8.
Oh,
right?
Yeah, she's aware. Yep.
She's way down the line, where most of the people that come to us are kind of just dabbling in this. I think this might be hurting me. I don't really know how this might be hurting me. It hurts, but I'm not sure why. And so they're more on the 3 and 4 end. Not that we don't get people that are completely aware, but we usually start with what kind of feelings did you have on the day of your abortion experience, leading up to your abortion experience? What was it like afterwards? Because so often, because of the cultural programming, we learn to numb this thing. We try to push it down so far, and our trauma tells us to do the same thing. And so oftentimes there's no real connection to, I think I'm angry, but I don't know what anger really looks like. I think I'm sad. I cry all the time, but I don't really know why I'm crying all the time. I think I feel resentment. I think I'm still relieved that I made this decision. And so they're still just needing that space to kind of grow in that spectrum of awareness of what happened here. Because in some places, these folks are stuck back in that moment. And I like to compare it to an emotional spine. We get kind of stuck. We get kind of, where we have the surgeons in our spine. If we think about it emotionally, we get stuck sometimes at 12 years old, 15 years old, 17 years old. And what you're talking about is this emotional availability, this emotional awareness that sometimes is not accessible to our clients. So really trying to meet them where they are. But a lot of times it's just even creating the awareness. After awareness, we follow into an acceptance. So often, if we're going to bring the political side of things in, you hear the pro-life people say, they're murderers. When are they going to take ownership of their decisions? How could they do this? This is a sin, right?
Yeah.
Until we grow awareness about it, we can't even enter into a place of acceptance of what we've actually done, what our choices have actually caused. And, then for the pro-life side says, you don't need awareness. This is your body, your choice. This was your right,
Pro-choice side.
Right. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah.
Pro-choice. Yeah. And so there's this like conundrum of like, accept it
Yeah.
from the pro-life side and this other side that's like, shush, but we know that healing starts with awareness, then it leads to acceptance, and then it allows us to take action to make different in our life. And so really, I think what you're touching on is, how aware are people in this space? I found that they're not very aware. And if they are aware, let's help them get to that place of like, how has this really manifested in your life? What other things are you walking through? How is this showing up in all these places? And as they continue to develop that, then they'll get to that place of acceptance of, oh my gosh, I was sexually abused at 5 years old. Sex became an object to me. I used it my entire adolescence to suffer through low self-esteem, anxiety, and all of that. Found myself in very vulnerable situations with unexpected pregnancies and STDs and all threats of all of these other things. And, I just kept putting Band-Aid, Band-Aid, Band-Aid. And now here I am at 38 years old. And I'm like, I can't live like this anymore. My everything is just breaking inside of me, and I need to get to the root of it.
That it's surprising, but it's not surprising that people generally, like you said, on that 1 to 10 scale, don't know or are not really fully aware. And it's sad because I can only imagine that, they're making a humongous decision based off of being 30 or 40% aware of why they're making the decision, rather than being at least like 80, 90%. Ideally, you want to be 100, but obviously you don't really know until, until after the fact. And then it's easy to play Monday morning quarterback, but wow, 30 to like 3 or 4 to 10. That's insane. But I get it too, because people, it's an emotional time. And if you want to hinder thinking, become emotional.
Right.
If you want to hinder thinking, become emotional. I always thought that, the best like UFC fighters and the boxers, the reason that they can like have those bitter war of words with people, that they come up with these crazy, very funny lines to like talk crap to their opposing fighters, because they're unemotional. They're in a very emotional time, and their brain is able to function in a high stress environment while not being emotional, and then they're able to actually make out something very intellectual to say. And when you're in those emotional times, you can't. You can't. And I can only imagine how emotional that those times can be. And you're making a decision as best as you can. And it's tough to be aware when you're emotional, because especially if it's unplanned. How can you plan to be in a spot of unemotional if it is indeed unplanned? So I, kind of reminds me, I did a podcast last year during November with a nonprofit called Movember, which was a nonprofit that helps, men's health. And we had spent a good chunk of time talking about men suffering in silence, and then leading to suicide. And I can't think of a better example to compare it to than this, because women suffer in silence then, just as bad as men are with things. And from the women that I know that have been involved in these types of circumstances, they're functioning very well with what they have gone through in terms of like their life. Because you can't tell, you can't tell. They're able to compartmentalize this stuff very, very well, and tap into it when in their control. And that's kind of impressive, I have to say, from an intellectual standpoint, that they're able to have high-paying jobs and go through life and still have a family and be successful when they've encountered an experience that is a high level of emotion and traumatic, and do well with themselves with it,
And we would call that resilience, that there
Yeah.
are people that have like really high levels of resiliency and others that don't. And I think it's so important what you said, because I think that's exactly what's wrong with why we struggle with people, is that we celebrate these people that have experienced these terrible things in their life and they're super successful. And then tomorrow they commit suicide and we're like, what the hell happened?
Yeah.
The reality is that they've been stuffing and trying to cope, and maybe their high level of success is their coping mechanism and their motivation is not pure and they're not taking care of themselves. And so I think that's where we have this conundrum in society, is we're like, oh yeah, everything's firing on the outside really well. Everything on social media looks good. But deep down inside, is somebody really checking on their, emotional temperature? Where are they really at? And is anybody even talking to them about that? Are they even willing to talk about their emotional health? The likelihood that they have disassociated, right? Much like a boxer, they have to do that. That's a game that they play with their head, just like athletes have to play. That's why it's so hard to integrate after war and after being a professional athlete into the world, because it's like, oh, it's not this anymore, and I'm not saying everybody struggles with that, but we often see this like, okay, this is not real world. This is not daily living. This was a game that I played with myself to be successful. And I think we miss that sometimes as a culture.
Oh, I think so. Absolutely. I mean, you hit it on the nail on the head before. We really do, because it's, when you see a change in someone's behavior, especially in a longevity type of frame, over time, and it's still there, you can go back. It's almost like, if you misplace your TV remote, you're going to go, where's the last place that I remember having it? Yeah. If somebody has changed their behavior over the course of time, all you have to do is just go, when was the last time I remember this person in that normal framework? And you'll probably find the time frame where something may have happened or they may have encountered something. So, hats off to you guys for being one of the only people on the planet to depoliticize one of the most major political issues that people are going through, that is just as important as all the other issues that are happening that I've been able to talk about on my podcast before. Because I can tell you this, it is so refreshing to hear and be able to have this discussion, because this discussion proves that you can have these discussions with people. You can. It just, it just has to be in a functionally driven way, like we have. And you guys are an absolute unicorn with it, because I can tell you, when I started this podcast, it says no politics. And if you had said from the day one, which was like a year and a half ago, saying, hey, Dan, one day you're going to talk about politics, or one day you're going to talk about abortion, I would say, oh, well, that must have been the day I flipped. I flipped on my mission. But it's not. It's not, it's just, I'm really glad that we're able to touch on such a hot topic and keep it, and just look at it from a humanitarian point of view, where it's affecting people's emotional state. And it's just a walking secret. I mean, it's a secret that is hiding in plain sight. And 1 out of 4 women under the age of 45, if we can walk away with that, we might be able to have more constructive communication over the issue, and realize why sometimes as soon as we start to get into a conversation, somebody might just go with a jab and just start reaching out right away and go and jump into that passionate mode, because they might have an experience from abortion that they're tired of keeping in, and that's their way of expressing it, So, we might look at things a little bit differently there. So, I do have some information on the screen now that where people can find you guys and either help and support, or to reach out to you and try to convert some of those numbers for people that need help to actually finding help, because they're not getting it from any other place. But other than that, are there places you would prefer, people reach out to, they can help or find you guys?
Yeah, my best place to offer you is supportafterabortion.com. There's a chat feature there. There's a phone number there. You can text, you can call. If you're outside of the United States, you can use WhatsApp, you can use Facebook, Instagram, email us. We're here for everyone. And, if it's you or a family member, or maybe, like you said, a volunteer or somebody who is like, I want to add this to something I'm already doing that is helping people, we're here to help coach you through that.
Okay. Good,
Mhm.
good. Lisa, I can't thank you enough for coming on. I'm looking forward to hopefully hearing that people have listened to this and maybe reached out, and we'll definitely link up down the road then.
Yeah, Dan, thank you so much. I appreciate your heart.
No, thank you, Lisa.
Mhm.
With every star